So NIO said that they're going to be placing swap stations in every single county. All right. And this was for Guangzhou province and Fujian province. So for some of the different provinces, he's guaranteed that they're going to have swap stations and even multiple swap stations in every single county. And clearly, NIO knows that the more swap stations you have, the more sales you're going to get in that region, which we all understand. The thing is, all right, wow, how many swap stations is enough? All right, so they're clearly going to put out a lot of swap stations, and he's guaranteed that if, he actually said this. He said this face to face with a lot of these NIO owners, guaranteeing them these swap stations. He said that if they can't reach that target of having a swap station at every county in like Guangzhou, all right, he's gonna make the general managers look for a new job. Wow. So basically, you're forced to place out these swap stations. So that's very nice in having these swap stations in every county. It's going to be very convenient to go and swap.
By June 30th next year, within 1 year, we in Henan province will have a battery swap station in every county. Certainly some counties may have more than one, but each county must have at least one.
So if you buy NIO now, whether you buy NEO or ONVO from now on, if you're in Henan province, you can drive wherever you want to go. There are already quite a few on the highways, so your travel won't take a long time.
One thing that really piqued my interest, and some of you guys were very concerned, is that the fact that Firefly will have its own separate swap station. What is going on with that? That just means that it can't use NIO's existing network. The whole point of ONVO is that ONVO can use the existing network of NIO swap stations, and it's not going to really cost them a whole lot of Capex to build out new swap stations. But for Firefly, they have to spend additional Capex to build out more of these smaller swap stations for Firefly. That's going to be a big amount of Capex. So why is that the case? And apparently NIO has already driven this car from like Suzhou to Shanghai, and he talked about how it's so nimble, it's so nice. If there was like a dual lane, you can just easily do a U-turn, and the turn radius is very, very nice. He talked about how this car is sort of like the Mini Cooper, and apparently it's very hard to make one of these smaller boutique cars very safe, but it's going to be based on EU NCAP 5-star safety rating. So it's going to be extremely safe, and you can do battery swap, and it's very nimble and easy to drive as well. So it's going to be a very good car nonetheless. Okay, but the reason it has to we have to see these new swap stations is because it's smaller form factor. One of the limiting factors of battery swap is that the dimensions of the car are constricted, right? You have to basically build out a big car, right? Big car wide, and there's nothing wrong with that, all right? There's nothing wrong with that, and it works perfectly fine. All of NIO's vehicles, they can all battery swap, and I think it's perfect. But when it comes to smaller cars, like the boutique cars, like the Mini Cooper, that kind of small, tiny car, that's not going to be able to fit, right? The existing battery pack isn't going to be able to fit. The swap stations won't be able to use these smaller battery packs as well, and won't be able to accept these Mini Cooper size Firefly cars as well, because the wheels are closer together, it's not as wide, and it just doesn't work. You can't back it into the swap station. It's not gonna, it just won't fit. All right, so that's why NIO has to build its own swap stations for the Firefly brand, which will be additional Capex, and that just kind of changes a lot of my theory of how things will play out. Because if you can't use existing swap stations, then straight off the bat, it's going to be very tough to sell Firefly cars, right? Because you don't have that existing infrastructure. Why do I think ONVO will succeed? Because straight off the bat, you got more than 1,000 swap stations that you can use, which will be fantastic. But if you have to build it out slowly, then you'll see slower sales growth with the Firefly brand. So we'll have to see. Like, and by the way, swap stations aren't cheap. Current swap stations, NIO swap stations, they cost somewhere around like 300,000 US dollars to build. 1.5 million RMB, around that price, give or take. All right, and the newer 4th gen swap stations probably cost more because it has more sensors and it uses NVIDIA's Orin X chips, etc. So yeah, it's pretty expensive, but I think for the Firefly swap stations, they will probably be a lot cheaper, okay, because it's much smaller, and they can probably place it in much more secluded areas. Like, for example, NIO swap stations, it's very hard to select a location because you can't have anything underneath. Swap stations are super heavy. You got so many batteries inside, and also you got a car inside. So that thing weighs many, many tons. Yeah, so if you have like anything underneath, like subway or parking lot, that's very dangerous. So location selection is actually a big challenge, but NIO is overcoming that challenge, right? So they're doing pretty well on that front. But I think with the Firefly swap stations, it's actually going to be much easier to do location selection for these swap stations. So going forward, it's definitely not something we want to see. It's not going to have the advantages that Envo has with Firefly. So, and if it has to have its dedicated swap station, it's really going to be like just Firefly, right? Who else is going to be using that swap station? Unless that's also going to be opened up to the Battery Swap Alliance, so they can also make boutique cars that can also do battery swaps. That would actually make more sense. And I think that will really be beneficial because now these other car companies, they're not constrained by the proportions of the battery pack for NIO's current swap stations. So that's going to be very nice going forward. But this does mean, overall, this whole entire thing, all right, NIO is just going to be placing out a lot of swap stations, all right? Swapping is going to be the go-to method for a lot of NIO owners to get their power, and sales are going to increase likewise in those areas that have higher concentration of swap stations. So sales are going to increase going forward, Capex increase going forward with these swap stations. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. So it's a net positive, more sales. All right, it's going to get more sales. Now, what I hope to see is that with 5th gen swap stations, all right, they're capable of making a swap station that can do both NIO, Envo, and Firefly as well, because this is what we want to see. We want to have sort of like a gas station that can accept everything, not just like, you have to build a separate gas station just for this brand. Like, that kind of stings a little bit. All right, so hopefully NIO can develop something for the 5th gen swap station and be able to do swaps for also Firefly. Otherwise, building out all these swap stations for the Firefly, just for the Firefly brand, without sales of those being guaranteed, it's going to be tough, right? The more swap stations you build, of course, you're going to get more sales. But then, if you don't have that many cars, why would you build that many swap stations? So we'll have to see how NIO decides on things going forward with the Firefly brand and those swap stations. To be honest, I think NIO will come out with a clever solution for that, all right, going forward. And I'm sure NIO will come out with a fantastic car with the Firefly car. According to leaked pictures, it looks pretty nice, all right? And it's going to be affordable for everyone. Just a small boutique car. It's going to be in the cheap BYD entry-level category. And hopefully that sways a lot of people into buying NIO instead of BYD. And it could absolutely be possible that the Firefly brand sells way more cars than even Envo, than even NIO, okay? But they do have to get those swap stations up to basically release their special advantage. By the way, go check out Exter. Use my promo code MRP to get additional discounts on top of existing discounts. Their wallets are fantastically built, and also they have really cool backpacks. Go check them out.